We stand as the body of Messiah on the edge of eternity. Before us is the great gaping maw of a tribulation that was foretold by the Apostle Yochanan. We desperately try to peer into the murky, roiling clouds before us, wondering how best to prepare for the dark days that lay ahead. Some would advise that we store away as much food and equipment as possible. As in the days of Y2K, we busily pile up our provisions, thinking that perhaps we will minister to those around us with what supplies we have hoarded away. Others say not to worry. Drink, be merry, and continue on as if nothing is on the horizon after all. In fact, these will tell us that perhaps the end of the world is still distant upon the horizon, and even if it were near, surely Yahweh would not allow his people to suffer. Still others urge that we must sell everything we have and move to Israel. The so-called prophets tell us that there shall be a great ingathering of the chosen people in the physical nation of Israel, and that if we can only get there, everything will be okay. But this book is not going to advise any of the above. This book is going to deal with the one, in fact, the only way, to pierce through the darkness of the coming tribulation with a golden spear of light so brilliant that there can be no doubt this is the way Yahshua wants his bride to walk. Follow me were the simple words of a carpenter from Nazareth as he beckoned his first hand-picked disciples on a journey that would be more fantastic, troublesome, awesome, adventurous, fearful, pain-racked, and joy-filled than any adventure a man had ever been on. As amazing as the lives of the early apostles were, their story pales in comparison to the mighty exploits Yahshua has set before his bride in these final dark days of mankind's rule on earth. But those same words echo down the corridors of time to us. Follow me. Apostle Paul repeated those same words to the early congregations spread across Judea, Asia, and Rome. Follow me, even as I follow the Messiah. And so now I, Daniel Lee, invite the listener to follow me. We are going to explore the only true path through the perilous times before us. That path can be summed up in 3 words. Words that, as sure as the smoothest, strongest, firmest stepping stones, will guide us exactly to where we need to be. Love never fails. Chapter 2. The Making of a Love Warrior. My life had completely fallen apart. Cool darkness surrounded me. Burning tears streamed down my face, and my gut wrenched, not with sickness, but with an emotional pain so deep I could barely handle the grief. Racked with sobs, I cried and cried, my bed shuddering. Why? Was the only question that my mind could process. Why had all this happened to me? Why? I fell asleep that night, those very tears drying on my face. That emotional onslaught would repeat dozens and dozens of times over a period of months. Little did I know this was what Yahshua would use to begin to create a deeper sense of his love within me. So why was I crying so hard? I better start from the beginning. In the early winter of 2008, I got into a very bitter argument with my wife of nearly a decade. The argument resulted in her departing the house with our youngest baby, leaving me with our 4 oldest children. A few days later, I had to get to work and had been unable to find a babysitter for the children. My oldest was only 7 at the time. Not thinking clearly, and still very angry with my wife, I set the children up with food for the day, locked the doors, and left them home alone. This resulted in DHS, the Department of Human Resources, stepping into our lives. My wife actually returned home about 15 minutes after I left for work. She was accompanied by her uncle. Her uncle was justifiably upset with me leaving the children home alone and called the authorities. Though my wife and I would begin to reconcile over the next few days, it was too late. DHS knocked on our door later that week and slapped down an ultimatum. Either I live in a separate place from my wife and children while they investigate me, or they would forcibly remove our children. Things only went from bad to worse. While my wife and children were staying with relatives, I had my first interview with a DHS official. She told me I would need to take a parenting class and undergo a psychological evaluation before I could be reunited with my family. Rather than taking this in prayer to Abba, I flew into a rage. I refused to cooperate with DHS, which only deepened the problem. What might have resolved in a matter of weeks extended into months. I finally, very grudgingly, began to cooperate with DHS. But as I began to jump through the hoops, my wife filed for separation. The unbelievable pressure that had crushed her while I was wrangling with the state of Oregon had cooled her heart toward me, and now divorce was a very real possibility. In a matter of 9 months, I had gone from a relatively happy family, singing together in the evening to Yahshua, to the cold reality of a divorce. The children's rosy cheeks, happy laughter, and bright blue eyes as my wife would pull out her guitar and we would sing praises to our Creator dimmed into a distant memory. The darkest days of my life had only just begun. As I continued to jump through one hoop after another with DHS, restricted to seeing my now 6 children for only 1 hour a week in a Nazi-like government-controlled glassed room, I desperately tried to win the heart of my wife back. But as I brought her flowers on an almost weekly basis and took her out on dates as often as I could, there was a distance and coldness in her eyes. Her attitude communicated to me more than 1,000,000 words that she could utter. One very clear thing, that she had moved on. The divorce came 6 months later, just before DHS completely pulled out of our lives. But something unbelievably amazing happened. As, day after day, I unselfishly gave to my wife, trying to win her heart back, blaming myself for this whole mess, a stark reality burned into my spirit. Picture this: Yahshua, bearing the thick wooden stake, his beard torn from his face, his gnarled body sheathed in fresh blood. Enduring not only the incredible physical pain, he also took upon himself condemnation that was not his to bear. Lightning bolts of pain lanced through both his arms as the Roman soldier drove the 9-inch spikes into his wrists. Hanging from the tree, he cried in an agonizing voice, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" Yet 3 days and 3 nights after this terrible death, he gloriously resurrected from the grave, and his cross had been replaced with a crown. For the very first time in my life, I experienced a small slice of what Yahshua emotionally bore on that cross. I bore the condemnation of my wife rejecting me, blaming myself for her decision, still choosing to lay my life down and give to her. After months of enduring this pain, Abba lifted the cloud from my heart and swept me with such a precious wave of his spirit, it is even now hard to describe. The terrible pain of rejection and condemnation gave way to a brilliant gold crown of glory, and his sweet presence drew so close to me I could barely stagger beneath the weight. This is not the end of the story. In fact, this is but the very beginning. I share this testimony to give a very real example of what Abba does to create his love within our hearts. When he commands us to love our enemies, to give to those who had hurt us, to serve even the least of our brethren, these words are never meant to be some theoretical mental exercise. These words are meant to live in us, to animate our thoughts, our attitudes, our actions, to manifest the only person who can truly love without expecting anything in return. Chapter 3. Taking a Stand. Sweat blurred my vision. My back ached. My legs throbbed. I had been open-air preaching for close to 3 hours, and the crowd of nearly 100 students had not lessened, but only grown. The South Park blocks, beautified with an abundance of green from late spring through the summer, was cold and hard in the sober winter Oregon months. The sheet of an iron-gray, overcast sky only magnified the stone and cement, damp with recent rain, but spread out between leafless trees which clawed high into the air above me. The array of faces surrounding me this winter day was a mixed lot. Some were sober, others intently listening, still others angry. A heckler, who called himself Michael, and had made it his mission to blaspheme Yahweh in front of my face every time I chose to preach the word, lifted his hands in his typical antics of mockery. As Michael poked fun at my preaching, many in the crowd would laugh, and as the spirit of Yah burned deep within me, Abba spoke quietly in my heart. "This is why I will bring judgment to this nation, Daniel, because it is filled with clowns." I began to ponder Yah's word. The nation was filled with people who made light of the scriptures. These clowns were not just at PSU. They were the poor, the rich, the businessmen, the blue-collars, the clergy, the churchgoer, the young, the old. They were on an endless laugh track, making light of everything as the only means to drown out their accusing consciences. A fast food diet of football, movies, concerts, games, and entertainment all contributed to the frivolity of modern America. A frivolity directly at odds with the sobriety needed to pursue a Yah who was about to shake the heavens and earth. This would be one of my hardest days at PSU. I never had a break. Michael would constantly chide and mock me throughout the afternoon, and many times it felt the words Yah placed on my tongue fell flat, not reaching any of the mocking multitudes. Yet in the midst of the mockery, I spotted one lone student under deep conviction. Abba's voice spoke to me again. There, that one. He is one I am calling into my kingdom this day. Keep preaching, Daniel. Keep preaching. Flash forward. Now it's early spring. Rain has been falling most of the day as I gripped my umbrella in one hand, my damp and well-worn Bible in the other. Despite the wetness of the weather, a crowd of maybe 20 to 25 students have gathered to listen to the preaching. My heckler from winter has long since departed, only to be replaced by a new one named Marcus. As mocking as Michael was, his antics failed to even come close to the vile Marcus spewed at me. As I preached, Marcus drew close to my face, his nose nearly touching mine, screaming vile things that my mind has since blocked out. He continued his tirade for a good half hour, until his voice finally broke into a horse-like sputter. Sweet waves of the Spirit would wash me as Marcus yelled in my face, and by the time he was too weak to contend with me, a renewed strength filled my heart to reach out to those students who had gathered to hear the preaching. The day would probably bring one of the most profound dialogues I would ever have with Marcus. Tired, worn, his voice still hoarse, he approached me a few hours later and said, "Daniel, are you on drugs or something? How do you do this? How do you keep going like this?" Marcus didn't want an answer. He asked with a biting, sarcastic tone and walked away. Flash to a new scene. Having preached at PSU for a good 2 solid months throughout the winter, I had arrived on campus for the first day of the spring quarter. A young Asian student with short-cropped dark hair approached me before I had reached the stage from which I normally preached. "Preacher Dan, I've been wanting to ask you for a long time, how do you do it? How do you keep coming out here day after day and preach for as long as you do?" Sincerity filled his dark brown eyes, and I smiled at him. "It's not me. It's not me at all. It's Yahshua who lives inside me. He sustains me. He keeps me going." The student nodded, his sincere questioning gaze fading into troubled puzzlement. I pressed a tract into his hands, and he thanked me before heading to class. Love never fails. As 1 Corinthians 13 states, love suffers long, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Yahshua, who is love personified, is the only person who could possibly sustain me during the months of preaching. The exhausting work of laboring not only physically, but doing battle against spiritual powers of darkness unseen would break the human spirit, unless it is sustained by the one who can bear all our infirmities. It is this unfailing, ever-enduring love that will become so essential during the dark days of tribulation before Yahshua's return. And it was given unto the beast to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given the beast over all kindreds and tongues and nations. Revelation 13:7. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahshua, and for the word of Yah, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. Revelation 24. These verses always conjure up for me images of the infamous French Revolution. In a matter of months, 18th century France had gone from a relatively peaceful nation to one shadowed by the cold, stark blades of the guillotine. Blood flowed across the cobblestone streets of Paris as a mob gone mad began to accuse anyone and everyone of treason against the newly formed, quote, republic, unquote. This same mob madness will evidently fill the end of Messiah. When we read in Daniel 11:44, "But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to take away many." How does one endure such a maddening holocaust? The endurance of this that will see us through is found in 1 Corinthians 13. Love never fails. In the face of the blackest hatred ever to have manifested on earth, the love of Yahshua will truly help the saints to, quote, love not their lives unto death, unquote. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, there were believers in Rome strapped to jagged wooden poles, their clothes torn from their bodies. As they were lit on fire and their skin popped and sizzled on their charred bones, they did not scream in terror. They lifted up their voices in adoration and praise to their Maker. This stunning display of grace won many pagans to Yahshua. The person of love, Yahshua, who filled these early believers, poured the grace needed upon them in that hour to endure even the fires of the crazed Roman emperors. We cannot endure. It is impossible to take the stand we must make if we do not have this love growing within us. This is the only way we will endure until the end, bearing in glory glorified, resurrected hands, a shining crown of glory that will never perish. And no doubt, as we stand on the sea of fire and glass, having overcome the beast, we will cast our glittering golden crowns at the feet of Him who died to set us free. Chapter 4. Divine Protection. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of Yahweh, He is my refuge and my fortress. My Yah, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings shall you trust. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flies by day, nor for the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor for the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes shall you behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because you have made Yahweh, which is my refuge, even the Most High, your habitation, there shall no evil befall you, neither shall any plague come near your dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. They shall bear you up in their hands, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shall you trample under feet. Because He has set His love upon me, therefore will I deliver Him. I will set Him on high, because He has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer Him. I will be with Him in trouble. I will deliver Him and honor Him. With long life will I satisfy Him, and show Him my salvation. Psalm 91. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Elohim. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, that hurt neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our Elohim in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Revelation 7, verses 2 through 4. As we ponder the dark days of the tribulation before us, many of us wonder who the 144,000 will be. This select group of people are sealed in such a way that they, at the very least, escape much of the destructive harm that will pummel the planet. I think if most of us were honest with ourselves, we would all admit that we have a desire to be a part of this group. After all, who wouldn't want to evangelize through the terrors of the Great Tribulation while escaping the death and torture befalling the people of the world? But the reason I started this chapter quoting Psalm 91 is because of a verse that I believe is the most important in the entire chapter. Because He has set His love upon me, therefore will I deliver Him. I will set Him on high, because He has known my name. Although I do not know who all the individuals are who will make up the 144,000, I do know one characteristic they will all possess. They will set their hearts, their love, upon Yahshua. I'm not just talking about loving Yah with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. This should be the quality of every believer. But I'm talking about the difference between a Mary love and a Martha love. Though both women adored Yahshua, Martha busied herself preparing things, while Mary contented herself with sitting at the feet of her Master, gazing up into His eyes, holding on to each word He spoke as if it was the last. We know the disciples loved Yahshua, yet only one, the Apostle Yochanan, is singled out as the beloved apostle, or the one whom Yahshua loved. Only he was found, time and time again, pressing his face into Yahshua's chest, a childlike abandonment of love if ever there was one. I have a radical thought. Perhaps the best way to become part of the future band of 144,000 is to set your love upon the lover of your soul, hanging upon His every word, gazing into His eyes, waiting on Him, spending time with Him. Imagine the clouds of thick incense rising from the altar in the holy place. Moshe, his eyes wet with tears, silently moves his mouth as he lays out face first before the altar. The presence of Yahweh deepens, pouring over this most humble man. Yet, as he rises from the floor, gripping his polished wooden staff, and departs the tabernacle, he leaves someone behind. Joshua. The young man, many years younger than Moshe, still presses his face to the floor, unwilling to leave the sweet presence of his Creator. Muttered whispers and rolling eyes from the crowds of those outside will wonder why this young man stays in the tent long after their leader has emerged. Some probably sigh out that Joshua is too heavenly minded to be any earthly good. But the young man before the altar doesn't care. His love is set on the Most High. he wants more of Yah. He wants far more. And he won't jump up and leave until he has spent as much time with Yah as he possibly can. So what of this divine protection? Evidently, these 144,000 are protected in ways that are not afforded everyone else on the earth. What does this divine protection look like? I'm sure we've all either experienced or heard stories of Yahweh intervening in miraculous ways. Some of these tales are more amazing than others. I have one that I would like to share. It was still a few months before my 18th birthday. My cheap four-door junk car had broken down the day before, so my dad had graciously allowed me to drive his gleaming white Toyota mini truck until I could get my car to the shop. After working a busy shift at the local supermarket, I arrived late to a Saturday night church meeting for praise and worship. After the service, I climbed in my dad's truck to head home. The Texas late winter twilight faded into hues of red, gold, pink, and purple on the western horizon. Balmy and warm, the air gave ample warning that the mild winter would soon give way to the hot and humid summer, skipping spring altogether. As I drove home, the fading evening quickly dissolved into a star-pricked night, and a fat moon poured its lunar ambiance across the rolling hills of central Texas. I drove at 70 miles per hour, the legal speed limit for this stretch of state highway just north of Austin. The thump of the road beneath the tires only made me feel carefree, even lazy, as I hummed to the radio, ignoring a passing car in the opposite lane who was flashing his lights at me. The highway curved to the left around a squat blue water tank that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Just around the curve, I noticed something very wrong. The unmistakable twin pools of car headlights speared into my eyes. A car, going the wrong way in my lane, barreled toward me. I had no chance to swerve out of the way, no chance to even scream. I only remember as the two headlights careened toward me, thinking one thing. Well, that was a nice life. The headlights disappeared into blackness as the crunching of metal drowned out all other sounds. My body flung toward the windshield, held back only by the strained cords of the seatbelt. Blackness. Metal not just crunching, but shrinking in protest, as if the entire universe was constructed of steel and imploding around me, caving in at all sides. Then another sound. A sound that swallowed even the shrieking metal. The thump and beat of hundreds, if not thousands of wings. Not tiny bird wings, but massive, thick, strong wings flapping furiously around me. Moments later, I blinked open my eyes. I still sat in the truck. Fresh clods of earth coated the windshield. Peering through the glass, I could see that I was on the side of the road off the highway. I shoved open the mangled driver's side door and staggered from the truck. The moon, still plump and white, revealed my dad's truck as a twisted metal ball. The adrenaline that coursed through my body temporarily covered the throbbing of my broken right wrist. I shouted out to the sky, "What happened? What happened?" The strobe blue, red, and white lights of emergency vehicles flashed the night. As I approached a medic, repeating my question, the man frowned at me. "Please, we're trying to attend to a head-on collision. You need to get back into your car, sir." Pointing back to my dad's deformed truck, I cried out, "That's my car! I was in the accident!" Later that night, as an ambulance whisked me south to downtown Austin, I would learn from a shocked paramedic the details of what had happened. An old woman driving with her granddaughter had forgotten to put her contacts into her eyes. She crossed over the double yellow line, going 70 miles per hour. She hit me head-on, with a total collision force of 140 miles per hour. The paramedic, in whispered tones, said he had never seen anyone survive such an accident. The grandmother had sustained a broken jaw due to a punch from her airbag. Her granddaughter, in the back seat, had escaped all harm. I had a lacerated chin and broken wrist that would heal in 3 weeks. To this day, every couple of years or so, I will get a subtle pain in my right wrist, a reminder of that night. As I rub my wrist, I am thankful for Abba giving me this lifelong memorial. What happened was never a question in my mind. Abba had dispatched hundreds, if not thousands of angels to protect me and the other two people involved in the accident. I had, at the young age of 17, experienced divine protection. But there is a deeper point to this story. Shortly after that traumatic night, I would begin the slow change of giving up on all my hopes and dreams of becoming a famous screenwriter in Hollywood, and instead devote myself to evangelism. With a fervency I used the last few months of my senior year in high school to witness. I had, through His divine protection, learned to start truly setting my love upon Him. And this is what is needed in the hour of the Great Tribulation. We are to love not our lives unto death. We are to totally abandon ourselves to Him. We are to lovingly adore and wait upon Him, giving everything we are to the One who delivers us from all evil. We are to, simply put, trust under the shadow of his loving wings. Chapter 5. Walking in the Spirit. If there is one thing that stands as the most important lesson to learn for the dark days of tribulation ahead, it must be learning how to walk in the Spirit, how to listen to his voice. How many times do we read of the Messiah closeting himself away in the desert, or taking time to go up to the mountain to be alone with his Father? The only way he could continue to fulfill his mission on earth was to make sure he continued to spend quiet, lengthy times with Abba in order to be filled with a fresh anointing and to know where to best go from that point. A number of months ago, I was intending to drive across town to run an errand, but Yah had me go via a completely different route that taught me better how to listen to his voice and to walk by the Spirit. The following is the testimony that I wrote. I had an awesome series of events that occurred today, which I must share, for freely I've received, so freely I must now give. I had intended to reach a destination on the opposite side of town from where I live. The best, most logical way to get there is to take the major freeways that ring Portland, Oregon. But Yah had me trace a very unusual route using Google Maps, one which was winding and snaking and confusing at best, one which would